Thank you for tuning in to an episode of InRange. This is the August 2021 Patreon-supported Q&A. All of these questions here are supported by Patreon viewers that keep InRange alive. InRange has no sponsors, no overlords, no advertising, no money from YouTube, even YouTube Red. Only you, the viewer. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. Let's get going. Henry S. Have you ever had any unfortunate encounters with cactus? Yes. You do not live in Arizona without having unfortunate encounters with cactus. As you walk through the desert, no matter what kind of shoes you have on, the chances of you not getting stabbed by one of these things is essentially 0%. Eventually it will happen, and jumping cholla, as they're referred to, are called that not because they actually jump, because they're so likely to get caught on you that you will think that they are jumping. The reality is they're not. They're just that sharp. Once you get one in you, you try to pull it out, tends to get more stuck. It's generally a nightmare. So yeah, it's happened, and it will happen again, and if you spend enough time in the desert, it will happen to you. Caleb R. What are your thoughts on concealed carry insurance? Good idea or a gimmick? Caleb, I'm taking this question because I know it's been asked over and over and over again, and I find it interesting how often it's getting asked, because quite honestly, I don't have really any valid thoughts about this because I've never really looked into it enough to concern myself with it. I will tell you that my gut instinct tells me it's probably a gimmick. I don't really look into it because of that feeling, and that might be stupid on my part, but at this moment, when I look at that and the reality of the situation, I feel like it's much more on the gimmick side than it is the good idea side. But that comes from pretty much a hot take, because I don't have really good data set to provide you in that regard otherwise. So I would say that you probably should do some research into it and not take my answer as anything scientific or even valuable in regards to that question. But I'm taking the question because it does get asked a lot. Andrew H. If you had to choose a single handgun before the year 1900 to be your only gun to take out into the wilderness to homestead with, what would you pick? And this is a single handgun before 1900. Well, we start getting to the point of having some automatics, but I think some automatics at the time were fragile and something I would not want to rely on in the wilderness. When it comes to this, I think especially when you say homestead, I would go with the most simple, reliable, durable design that I can think of, and there's really that means really the single action Army Colt, or the 1871, sometimes referred to as open top Colt, which I tend to prefer a little bit. But each of those are extremely durable and resilient, and so I would say the single action Army Colt, which is the reason the single action Army Colt was so popular in that period of time. I think that speaks for itself, quite honestly. Levi H. Are ammo supplies and prices returning to normal around you? Well, I don't know if I would have said they were returning to normal. They were getting better. But of course now we have this brilliant idea from the current dictator that we're going to now ban all ammo importation from Russian manufacture, which apparently accounts for something like 40% of all ammunition for sale in the U.S. market. And because of that brilliant idea from the new dictator, we are now going to see ammo prices surge in a way that they probably haven't ever surged before. And this is particularly problematic if you happen to have a 5.45 by 39 gun, because there's really no domestic manufacture of that. And of course, 7.62 by 39 and 7.62 by 54R will be a significant problem as well. Luckily, I have a good stockpile of both of those. But it's not just the Soviet calibers or Russian calibers that are going to be a problem, because lots of other ammunition is provided from that market to the United States, from like Tula for like 5.56, 9mm, etc. So, Levi, I know you asked this question before Biden made that boneheaded move, and here we are. And it's going to be worse than ever. So what this means for the future of ammunition availability and 5.54R and etc., I don't know, but it does not bode well. And the answer is, were they returning to normal? They were getting better, but they're now going to be worse than ever. Jeffrey K. What's a good place to start preparing for competition? I've been a bench shooter and a hunter for 13 years. My only competition experience so far is remote brutality, and I got the bug. I'm the guy who did it with an IMI Galil arm. Hey, Jeffrey, thank you for joining us in remote brutality. It's really fun, and we're glad to be able to bring that out to the audience in a way that people can do this at home. Frankly, the good place to start are with competitions that are less are less dynamic in movement than two-gun, quite frankly. Ones that come to mind would be Steel Challenge, which you can find around the country. It's really a stand and deliver. You stand in a box, draw your pistol, move to another box, super simple. I realize it's a pistol-oriented match, but the reason I think you can do 22, and maybe there's some places that do PCC. But the reason that would be a good place to start is because it gets you comfortable with the fundamentals of range safety, match safety, clearing, hold, string, unloading, all the things that come with a match before you go to a big deal event, like let's say a brutality event. The best one I can think of is the Steel Challenge. Another one would be the Glock, the touring Glock match that goes around. Those are both really good starter events. Ian F. Thoughts on a suppressor for a home defense handgun? Well, why not? If you have the ability to get one, and you can put a suppressor on it, and you have a handgun for home defense, which by the way I wouldn't recommend. I recommend long arms for home defense. Handguns are for something to carry concealed for defense. So if you're using a handgun for defense, it's because you can conceal it in public. Why you would use why you wouldn't use a long arm for home defense puzzles me. Handguns are harder to use in every way, and require more skill, especially under stress. And a long arm requires less, and you don't need to conceal a long arm while you're in your home. So why are you using handgun for home defense? I don't know, but a suppressor on a home defense anything is a good idea. Hopefully you'll never have to use it, of course, but if you have to fire it, it will not deafen you and everyone around you. It will make it so that it's possible to maybe have a follow-up shot easier than if you had to otherwise. And if you can do it, yeah, it's a good idea. Although what's even more important than that is a white light, probably either attached to or not attached to, but a way to identify what you're shooting at, because that, of course, is even more important than your hearing in a self-defense scenario in your home. Craig S. Third ask. Thoughts on FB Radham's return to the U.S. market? Well, Craig, I'm taking this one again sort of for the same reason I took one earlier today, because it's your third time asking it, and I'm sorry I hadn't gotten to it yet. But the reason I didn't take this one is because I don't really have thoughts on this. I look at what Radham's putting out, and they're just glorified AKs that don't really bring anything to the market that I think is particularly exciting or alluring. And so I guess my answer is, meh. Really? Meh. All of these guns that are just, black magazine PMag adapters, which I know these are AK variants, but they're all kind of the same thing. Once you get used to shooting one, it's like shooting another. There's something has to be dynamically and very different to make it exciting, and what Radham's bringing to the market is not that. Not from what I've seen so far, at least. Then again, of course, more guns on the market. Maybe that'll help with costs and prices, and will diversify options to people that see something in Radham that I don't. Donald G. Do you think a pump shotgun or a lever-action rifle would be a better choice for defense in an RV traveling the continental U.S.? You know how much I love lever guns. But I'm going to give you an interesting answer on this one. I think the pump shotgun's probably better. You load that up with some double aught, or go with a 20 gauge where it's less recoil and gives you this really more than enough than you need with proper buckshot. And a shotgun is hard to argue against for self-defense. It's a very capable weapon, even though I don't like them so much in competition. So, since you asked, lever gun or shotgun, I'm going to go with the shotgun. RGB. Any appreciable difference in double-action revolvers versus single-action revolvers in a cowboy action or proto two-gun environment? Well, cowboy action matches do not allow you to use double-action revolvers. They are prohibited by the rules of the match. So, in that regard, it is not relevant to a cowboy action match, and so therefore you can't use them in a cowboy action match. Now, some renegade cowboy action environments might let you do that, but the reality is that is not common, and it is not technically allowed by the rules. In a proto two-gun environment or matches like that where you could use one, I don't think they're all that useful. Generally speaking, unless you have a very high-end double-action revolver, the trigger, the length of the trigger press before the round goes off requires a lot of extensive training. So if you're going to do a lot of training with it, you can be quite fast with a double-action revolver, but you can also be very fast with a single-action revolver and have a better trigger press and really make it easier to hit what you're aiming at. So I honestly think when it comes to a DA versus an SA revolver, at least in a match environment, not necessarily for self-defense, these are different topics to some degree, I will go with the single action. Mr. Smileys, what are your thoughts on schools having firearm safety training classes as either a mandatory class or an optional elective one? I would think the answer to this is sort of obvious, Mr. Smiley. Why would we? We currently don't, and it is extremely stupid. The U.S., our culture here in the U.S. frequently thinks for somehow that ignorance is so often the better answer than education. And this is one instance of many in that regard. Another one is really proper sexual education, like so many places that force this idea of abstinence, which perhaps some people adhere to that and believe that that's the right answer. But the reality is, we know as a species, we wouldn't be here if that was the case. And the reality is, human drives are human drives, and forcing abstinence as a primary form of sexual education is dangerous, increases STIs, increases the risk of accidental unintended pregnancies. And in the same regard, not having training in a world, even basic fundamentals of firearm safety, in a world where, the US at least, where we are really saturated with firearms. The chances of you running through your life without ever encountering a gun is unlikely. Now, where you live might be different than others, even if you're not into guns, I mean. But not having basic fundamentals of how they work, how to load, how to unload, how to make sure they're safe, is ignorance over intelligence and education. And ignorance is never a good answer. And I really wonder why here in the US we so frequently default to ignorance. This is another one. So it depends. Either side is culpable of this, right? When it comes to sexual education, generally speaking, the right wing freaks out and uses some sort of morality argument as why we can't teach that, and that's the wrong thing to do, especially from public education, because that's for the home. And the left typically goes there with the gun thing. Oh my gosh, we can have guns in the school, teaching people how to use weapons of death. That's for the home, or not allowed at all. And the reality is both sides are just as stupid, just on different topics. William F. Quick! You're being attacked and must defend yourself. Your choices of a weapon are a Zip 22, an S333 Thunderstruck, or a Cobra Terminator. Which do you choose? You're going to be surprised. The Zip is ridiculously bad and doesn't even function. The Thunderstruck tumbles rounds and is only good to 3 yards, and the Terminator is the Terminator. I don't know, these are all such bad choices, but the reality is, if I had to pick one of these quick, because I have to right now, I'd still pick the S333. At least you got a couple trigger presses, it does fire, and hopefully you're in close enough ranges to make those things work. John W. How do you sharpen a bayonet? You don't. You don't sharpen a bayonet. Bayonets are not knives. Bayonets are designed to be used on the end of a gun for the purposes of sticking and skewering and stabbing an enemy at a distance further away than having to use it in your hand. Sharpened bayonets tend to get stuck in things like bone and etc. And there are lots of historical accounts of people who sharpen their bayonets finding that to be a problem, including even the Japanese. So the answer is, how do you sharpen a bayonet? You don't. You get a knife. Oh man, I have asked multiple times on how to pronounce this. Multiple people have answered me, and I still can't get it right. I'm just going to butcher it, and you can all complain. It's just what it is. Vercingetorix. With Apple's new photo scanning announcement and near immediate implementation, do you have any thoughts on the most secure options for mobile phone market now that Apple appears to be shifting away from their long-standing security and privacy stances? No. So for those, this really could be a video in its own right. For those of you that don't know what this is, Apple has decided to recently announce that they're going to enter the war against child pornography by implementing a feature in the operating system of your phone and your computer, iOS or OS X, where if you have iCloud syncing enabled, that appears to be fundamentally required, but probably isn't in the long term, they will do pattern hash matching to photos in your library, and if those hashes match any known child pornographic images off the web, so they will then flag it. And if you hit a certain flag number, not one, but whatever the number is of a number of hits, it will then flag your account and then require human analysis to look at what is going on with your account. Now, First of all, the one thing I can say about what Apple did is they at least told us they were going to do this. The chances of this stuff going on already in your operating system or in other environments is probably highly likely, even if they don't tell you that it's going on. The truth is, all of these operating systems we currently use from any large manufacturer, whether it's Microsoft, Apple, or Google, are filled with all sorts of things that can, and probably are, and sometimes frequently are, used as surveillance tools. GPS, pattern matching, hashing, screen text, text grabs, text matching, location awareness, as I already mentioned, your camera, your microphone. While there's this nice allure in your device of being able to say, don't use the camera, do use the camera, do use the microphone, don't use the microphone, turn off iCloud syncing since I don't want to be part of your surveillance system. Truth is, you're believing in the operating system manufacturer to actually adhere to those rules, and that there's not escapes or ways to break out of those sandboxes to do things anyway. The fact is, this is the cold hard answer. There's no good answer. At this point, the tool has become the trap. The operating system is only part of it. The internet and its corporate oligarchy has turned into a gigantic surveillance system. Each and every one of these devices, whether it's Google or Apple or something else, not too many other options are there, are problematic, to use that word, in regards to if you are concerned with your privacy. Using these devices puts us in a situation where we are essentially stuck between either being part of the world and not being completely ostracized, or essentially giving up our privacy to a corporate oligarchy in the process. Apple used to be sort of the differentiator with their messaging, and they are now not the differentiator. They have actually moved the bar further down the hole than anyone else by announcing that they're putting backdoors into your operating system to make it possible to scan video and photo content on your device, whether or not you upload it to the internet. And it sucks, and it is a complete disappointment, and it is sabotage and a stab in the back of those who have thought that Apple was at least better in regards to their stance towards privacy. But what it is even worse is it means that we are all pretty much screwed if you want to do anything that isn't bowing your knee to at least one corporation or another. Theoretically, you can get an Android device and throw on some third-party, open-source piece of shit that might not work with most anything, and suddenly that'll still exclude you from most of the world. Try to get an Uber, if you need an Uber, with your third-party Android open-source hacked phone, because you can't run the damn app. So, truth is, no. This is getting worse. It's all getting worse. Privacy died a long time ago. This is just one more example thereof, and Apple has done a disservice not only to their customers, but to the entire world and the industry by moving this problem even further into the darker hole of the death of privacy. Thank you, Apple, for abandoning all of us and sabotaging everyone. Because now, guess what? You're going to see the same thing for sure on Google and Android and everything else. Even if they were doing it already, now they're going to announce it. And the reality is that type of scanning system can be used by any government to do anything it wants. Now, the one thing that you should remember is that they could have done that with your device anyway, and probably already was. Wow. Thika Bufimon. If someone was only able to own one gun, what is the gun you would pick out for them to be the most multi-purpose or with the widest range of applications? Well, you know, we see a lot of malice in the world against shotguns. The truth is, the shotgun. The shotgun can be loaded with birdshot for hunting, buckshot for hunting, buckshot for self-defense, and slugs for distance. And those are all capable, especially with slugs. You can get out to the distances you probably would ever need for any one of these things. So the truth is, when it comes to something with the most purpose as a singular gun, just like smoothbores back in the day, shotguns are the equivalent thereof. The truth is, a manually operated shotgun would be the most multi-purpose, widest range of application firearm you could own. Tim K. Do you find that it's important to have an internal narrative or logic to a stage design to explain why competitors are doing what they're doing in your stages? Or do you find yourself going, this is a challenging target presentation and difficult physical task, good luck everyone? Well, Tim, I think you're asking two questions in one. One is it's fun to have themed events so that people can let their imagination run wild and have an idea about what the stage means. So, like, we recently did the Wasteland Shuffle, and we did the Fallout theme match. And people had a good time coming out there in Wasteland gear and Fallout-themed costumes and weird guns, and having a narrative like this stage is fighting the NCR and this stage is fighting Caesar's Legion, etc. But the reality is, when it comes to stage design, I design them generally along the lines of testing a specific marksmanship skill on the clock, and then add a narrative in after that if I feel like it. So, no, I don't think it's important, and I don't think you need a narrative, but I do think designing a stage with a purpose makes sense, and it's something I think that differentiates two-gun action challenge and brutality matches from many others, in that we have intended purpose for each stage rather than just a bunch of targets lined up with, here you go. Red Army Reenactor. Of all the participating nations' officially adopted weapons, which World War II submachine guns, which one do you think was the worst? So what you're asking me is, what is the official worst World War II adopted submachine gun what was the worst one of those? The Sten immediately comes to mind. The Sten's really bad. The original Sten's really bad. The Japanese Type 100's pretty bad. And the Thompson's really bad. That's going to be controversial, but the Thompson was obsolescent by the time World War II came along. Big, heavy, more recoil than it should have had, lower capacity. It's a beast of a gun with terrible ergonomics. But really, the worst one, you have to go with the worst one. I'm going to go with the Sten. London Jolly. Third time asking. Thoughts or experience with running a chest rig on top of armor for Armor Division? I don't know why I didn't get to this one sooner, because I think that's a good idea. Having a plate carrier that you then put a chest rig on top of it is really a good idea, because you can always change out the carrier that's on top of your chest rig that's on top of your armor carrier and make it different for different weapon systems, etc. So I think this is a fine experience. There's nothing wrong with running a chest rig on top of a pretty much naked, slick armor carrier. I think it's a good solution. Tim B. What are your recommendations for learning to shoot 5.56 at long distances? The best answer for this is to shoot 5.56 at long distances. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but it's the truth. Really, the answer is to go to shoot NRA high power across the course. 200, 300, 600 yards. Once you get 600 yard prone kind of dialed in, which by the way, ain't easy, you can actually then progress to single loading and 1,000 yard competitions, believe it or not. But really, NRA high power across the course, even 200 yards standing offhand, is quite a challenge. But the 600 yard prone line, where you just sit there and just lay and put down rounds and call wind, is the best possible way to learn to shoot 5.56 at long distances. And those marksmanship fundamentals transfer to any other shooting thing you'll ever do, ever in your life. So that would be my best answer. Robin V. If you had to use any of the single-shot firearms that were used in World War I, which one would you pick? Single-shot firearms used in World War I. Wow, Robin, you probably should ask this question on a different channel. That's more of a forgotten weapons question than for me. I can't think of the single-shot weapons used in World War I. The heck would it be? When I took this, when I saw single-shot, I was just going to say Trapdoor Springfield, because I still love and really think the Trapdoor is an excellent firearm. But that was not used in World War I. Not really. So, I don't have an answer for you. I would have to research that further. Bourbon. How to adjust the crimp best for feeding 45 Colts rounds into a lever action? Can too much crimp be bad? Well, you can crimp to the point that you're damaging the projectile and impacting your accuracy. But the reality is, a pretty good crimp, especially if you're loading black powder, matters. 45 Colts was never designed to be a lever action round, and therefore it doesn't have any taper to it really, or any bottleneck. So it is possible, it really does foul more than a lot of other rounds, especially with black powder. So a good, solid, strong crimp means that it actually helps cause the combustion to increase a little bit within the cartridge, and it diminishes the amount of blowback and filth that gets into the action of the lever gun with 45 Colt and a straight wall cartridge. So I would say as much crimp as you're willing to impact without increasing your accuracy and or destroying your cartridge mouth for your next reload. But as long as you find that nice middle ground between not impairing your accuracy too much and not destroying the mouth of the cartridge with the crimp, that's where you want to be. James B. Fourth time, I think. Do you have any thoughts on Elon Musk's Neuralink project, which appears to meant to link the human brain and computers? I think this potential, along with increasing computer AI, opens up a very conversational space. Well, I'm a big fan of the idea of, I really do like the idea of transhumanism and the idea of using technology for us to evolve to something better than we currently are. Do I specifically think that Elon Musk is the guy to do that, or that his Neuralink project is the answer? I hope not. I would like to see better venues than that, to be honest. But I do like the idea of wet wire, and I'd like the idea of transhumanism, and maybe Elon Musk will be the one to bring it to us, but I wonder what cost that will come. So I like the idea. I think we're going to eventually get there. I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon, and I think right now is extremely early, frankly, in terms of thinking of that as being even viable. Walker S. Opinion on China moving away from the QBZ series of bullpups to a traditional rifle. I don't know that China's doing that. I guess you know something I do not. But I would say that I would not be surprised. Their bullpups are not good. They are really not great guns at all. And for the most part, people that go to bullpups land up back to a traditional rifle eventually. And there's reasons for that. Is that the bullpup brings lots of liabilities and very few benefits. Aaron T. Why do manufacturers still produce government profile AR-15 barrels for anyone except the government? So for those of you that don't know what this means, government profile barrels are generally H-bars on the 20-inch and M4 style ones that are longer than 14.5 inches, maybe 16 inches with a muzzle device, or 14.5 inches with a permanently affixed muzzle device, and it has a grenade launcher cut. Overly thick, overly heavy, no application for civilian use whatsoever, and you're not mounting an M203 onto the thing, right? So why do they still manufacture them? The reason is because I think they're actually still the most purchased barrel. They are the most purchased barrel profile for AR builds in the US. And the reason for that is LARPing. They look like the government, they look like the military equivalent, and people want their guns to look like an M4, and they prioritize form over function. So therefore, since they produce lots of them, they're also lower cost, which then helps feed that beast. So for the people that want to buy something form over function, they'll buy a government profile M4 barrel. And since so many people do that, they make lots of them. And since they make lots of them, they're lower in cost and therefore more available. And therefore, it's a cycle of events. The truth is, a government profile barrel on your personal AR-15 is overly heavy and does nothing but look cool, if it does that. So, but that's why they produce them, and that's why they're still out there. G3 Yost. What is your least favorite reason to sneeze? Examples. Pepper in the nose, a natural itch, or a drippy nose. My least favorite would be drippy nose, because the reality is that means you're probably either sick, have an allergy, or you're just going to keep sneezing for a while. And I hate those feelings, just like all of us do, right? So my answer would be, my least favorite reason to sneeze is drippy nose. Phantom Boomer. I'm in the PRC, the People's Republic of California, but I subscribe to the Pima Pistol Club newsletter, and all I get are notifications of the IDPA matches. Why are there no announcements about the bug or 2G ACM? Probably because we haven't tried to contact them to put us into the newsletter. The newsletter is written by a handful of people at the club, and frankly, Two Gun Action Challenge match doesn't need any promotion. At this point, neither does the bug match. So it's not really in our wheelhouse to ask them to promote it. And I know that the bug match doesn't really need it either. So the truth is we just aren't asking them to do it. Michael S. Just wanted to say, love your content, and your collabs with Otto and Shay have been banger. Thank you very much. They've been really cool to work. Otto and Shay has been great to work with. My question is, assuming there weren't ridiculous regulations on SBRs or otherwise stocked pistols, do you think there would be potential for a PDW sidearm for special forces or other specialists? And otherwise, how would the development of a sidearm style weapon be different? Well, first of all, I don't really think that SBRs and stocked pistol restrictions from the NFA has really restricted any form of PDW development for special forces or the military. They can do whatever they want. They're not restricted by that. And the truth is, none of them are asking for it. And since none of them are asking for it or putting out an RFC to do it, no one's doing it. And the truth is, there's been a few out there that have been made, and they really see no adaptation. So, I should say adoption. I I always do that. They never see really much adoption. And as a result, there's not been a reason for it. The truth is, they don't need to worry about SBR, of course, whatsoever. And stock pistols are interesting, but clunky and big compared to what they are. And you don't really need them when you can just carry a submachine gun or an SBR. Let's see. Troy H. With every other unrelated corporate entity coming out at the same time and setting as early October deadline for vaccination without coordination, does InRange intend to require proof of vaccines for the upcoming November Desert Brutality match? No, I do not. It is an outdoor event, and it's not an indoor event, and I am going to recommend social distancing, and for those of you that see fit, masking. But this is an outdoor event, and what we do is we evolve with science as science tells us what we need to know. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know the transmission methodology, we didn't know the transmission rates, and we have now learned that in outdoor environments where there's free-flowing air and people aren't densely packed, and in a high UV environment, which we will be for the brutality match, it is a low-risk environment. Now, do I recommend you get vaccinated? Yes. Do I recommend you get a booster every 6 months? At this point, probably yes, until this thing gets figured out, because that's where the science is leading us. Everything I've said about this has been aligned with the best science that I can get my hands on data-wise. And data-wise, the reality is requiring a vaccination for an outdoor event in a high UV environment where we're having social distancing is not realistic, not necessary. Do I recommend that you get your vaccination? Yes. Do I recommend a booster at this point? Yes. Am I going to require it for Desert Brutality? No. Philip W. In previous videos, you mentioned your dislike for both the pistol and the rifle, the VZ52 and the CZ52. Which one do you dislike more? The VZ52 rifle is worse than the CZ52 rifle. They're both garbage. The CZ52 likes to break firing pins, but the VZ52 is literally one of the worst designed rifles I've ever seen. It was like they took all of the worst ideas the Germans had in World War II and shoved them into one rifle. So if you had to ask me to pick between which one I dislike more, the VZ52 or the CZ52, I would pick the VZ52 rifle. Gunner D. I've really been enjoying black powder content, and your videos have inspired me to purchase a black powder revolver, but I don't have the first clue about what I should start with, cap and ball or a cartridge firing revolver. Any advice or tips or manufacturers or vendors to look for? Should be for nothing serious. Well, first of all, unless you want to get into reloading black powder cartridges, you don't want to do cartridge. Black powder cartridge requires specialized projectiles, well, special lead projectiles with the proper lubricant, which is kind of a pain in the ass. If you're going to want to start to get into black powder, it's easier to go with a percussion gun. And for me, my favorite percussion guns are the 1860 Colts, although most people will recommend the Remington New Army. I don't think that highly of the Remington New Army. I'm going to do videos about that. Everyone's really hype on it because you can change the cylinder, but the truth is the 1860 Colt, properly tuned, especially with slick shot cones, can be a really excellent percussion revolver. So in terms of manufacturer, go with Pieta, Birdie. The truth is both of them make lemons, both of them can be a problem, but both of them are generally fine. Ethan N. The recent content has been excellent, even by InRange standards, and I love the collabs with Otto and Shea and the Old West stuff. Thank you very much. I preface this question by saying that I own many 9mm handguns and carry 9mm. Popular wisdom is that modern 9mm is as effective as .45. Why does advanced bullet design make the calibers equal in effectiveness instead of making both more effective? Well, I guess in theory, if you're going to slice the salami thin enough, a projectile of the same quality in a .45 and the projectile in a 9mm might be slightly better, but then again maybe not, because what you're losing with .45 is velocity, and with 9mm you have more velocity, slightly smaller projectile diameter, but with higher velocity and proper projectile design, the truth is you get the minimum penetration required and the expansion required to do the job. And .45, while it is slightly larger in diameter, has lower velocity, and therefore needs to expand less, so they really become kind of a moot point. They sort of do the same thing. As long as you get enough penetration and enough expansion, you're fine. So in that regard, a 9mm is just as good as a .45, except you have higher capacity and lower recoil. So that's why I think you're seeing that. Daniel O. Skittles, M&M's, or Reese's Pieces? Easy. M&M's. And not the peanut ones. John T., there's an interesting battle during the Civil War that happened in New Mexico territory. Any chance you could give your take on it? I plan to do Civil War content in New Mexico at some point, so I don't want to go down that path in this question, John, but there's quite a few battles in New Mexico that were really interesting regarding the Civil War, and someday they will show up on InRange. John B., what is your favorite bottleneck rifle cartridge and your favorite rimmed pistol revolver cartridge, and why? Favorite bottleneck rifle cartridge? 5.56. 5.56 is great, low recoil, accurate, used to be cheap. Favorite rimmed pistol revolver cartridge? 45 Colts, because it's super easy to reload, easily obtained, can do smokeless and black powder, and if loaded properly isn't too bad for fouling, etc. So those are my reasons. I'm not that tied to any of these things, but honestly, if you give me a 4440, I'm like, okay, I just don't like reloading 4440 because it's a giant pain to reload, but its performance is fine. Dandy Echo, are you the sort of person that consistently seeks out the same new experiences, or do you prefer to repeat the same experience that you know repeatedly? For example, do you like seeing new movies, or do you like rewatching the same movies multiple times? There are exceptions. There are some like things that are just awesome and I can rewatch them or do them over and over again. But generally speaking, my option will be to do something new rather than something I've done over and over again. I like new experiences, and you never know what next new experience is going to be one of your favorite. So I would say that getting stuck in cycles of the same thing over and over again is a trap, and you might cut yourself out of something you didn't know you'd like even more. Slap me like I'm roller delayed. When will you do a modernized lever gun project? I don't know. There's not a lot of products on the market that make it all that viable, and I'm not a machinist that can get parts machined for me that I want just made to do this thing. So the truth is, it's not that viable a project, and I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe. Depends on what happens in the market. Gator Doc. Given the way the U.S. and its citizens have handled the pandemic, has your zombie plan changed? Nope. My plan has always been to not really trust humanity, and here I am in the desert, not really trusting humanity. And recent events over the last couple of years have proven me right, sadly, and I'm sorry that that's the case. Cloud M. Why do militaries keep buying expensive new guns, such as the HK-416, if the choice of service rifle never really changes the course of a war anyway? Why not just keep using old stuff, or buy the cheapest bare-bones AKs? Well, you don't want to give your soldiers, like, old obsolescent equipment. That is, even if rifles don't change the course of a war, rifles and better equipment can certainly change the course of a battle or the survivability of the individual. So when we say that a new small arm, except with very rare exceptions, does not change the course of a war, that does not mean that there's not benefits to it. To the individual with that weapon in the battlefield, those technological advantages may very well be the difference between them surviving and dying. So does it make a difference to the individual survivability and capability of the individual soldier or platoon in a battle or individually? Yes. Does it necessarily change the course of a war? No. So, for example, if we had suddenly just changed everyone in the United States to AKMs, would it have changed the GWAT? Not really. Would it have changed the results of the Persian Gulf War? Not really. Would it have changed the results of the Vietnam War? No, not really. But it might have changed the effects to the individual in the battle. Amon B. You mentioned that you carry or used to carry a snub-nosed revolver. Have you ever considered carrying a .327 Magnum for better capacity and less recoil than a .38-357? No. .327 Magnum turned into sort of a meme round. It wasn't that much better in terms of lower recoil or anything than .38-357 properly done. And so I saw very little advantage to moving to that new proprietary cartridge, which, by the way, is now expensive and unobtainium in the US. So I don't see a lot of value into going to .327 Magnum, even though it's capable. .327 Magnum is capable, but properly loaded 38 plus P is fine too in a revolver. .357 can frequently be overbore. Norman W. How have you been holding up given the situation in the US/world, Carl? Meh. I'm here, but yeah, things could be better and things could be worse, right? So it's hard to not get disappointed. Dennis S. Fourth time asking. I'm sorry, Dennis. Why hasn't the 1913 rail been used in handguns as an interface to mount optics? Because it's too tall. It stands too high, and the minute you mount an optic on it, you're just way over bore. So more proprietary mounting systems allow for lower bore offset optics systems, and we're seeing that getting better and better in the market. So as for 1913, it's a giant bulky thingy, and it stands really tall. By the time you mounted an optic on it, you got this giant thing on top of your pistol. So, in my opinion, that's the reason you don't see the 1913 rail used in handguns. A lot of rain out here lately, a lot of green, and a lot of bugs. Cam H. Why is the Rhodesian conflict such a prevalent event in U.S. gun culture? Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? So this is sad, because this is a situation in which being able to actually study history has been usurped by people who turn this into another reason. In my opinion, and this will be an unpopular one for some people, but I don't care. The reason the Rhodesian conflict is so popular in the U.S. gun culture is for two reasons. One, it's been sold as a fight against the godless commies, which to a certain degree it was. And there's some truth to that, and people get really turned on in the U.S. when it's a fight against the commies. So, fight against communism. Kind of a grassroots fight against communism on top of that, which makes it even more exciting, especially when it gets to down to the individual farmer trying to save his family, and that lone, rugged individual survivalism that so appeals to so much of the American mindset, even though it's frequently what gets you killed. As well as, but the truth is, I think another reason for it, sadly, is that a lot of people won't admit to it, or maybe don't even think that this is the case unless they really become introspective. And that's hard for people to do. But the Rhodesian conflict, rightly or wrongly, I think to a large degree rightly, to be honest, was a very racist conflict. And there are people that not only see it as a war against communism, but they have no problem with it being used as a war of white supremacy. And I know there were people of color in the Rhodesian army, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, the majority population had no vote or rights in a country that was run by colonizers. And when the war got into earnest, it was really the white minority with greatly superior technology and tactics fighting against the majority wherever it ended up, which was obviously a very terrible place, as war typically does. The truth is, besides being a fight against communism, a lot of people either don't acknowledge it in their own hearts, or do acknowledge it but aren't willing to say it, or some of them just flat out admit it. It appeals to their inner white supremacist dreams. E. Raha. C and Arsenal have a new repercussion revolver series. Have you thought to do a collaboration with them on Old West revolvers? No, they haven't engaged me on whether or not they would want to do that, and they're kind of doing their own thing with percussion revolvers. And I'm sort of doing my own thing with percussion revolvers, and my hope would be that my content and their content augment one another. If they want to do a collab on it, we could. Although I have honestly got to tell you guys that collaborations typically don't really pan out to be that useful in terms of helping with views for either channel. So the reason to do a collaboration is because when each side can bring something different to the table, and maybe it would be cool to do a video on InRange and a video on C and Arsenal that somehow augment one another intentionally. That would be the kind of collab I would want to do. Fatsman Tactical. Do you think the AK platform had the same? Do you think if the AK platform had the same amount of civilian market support as the AR, it would be as modernized, or is there a problem with the platform itself? The AK is not as modular as the AR in general. It is not doesn't lend itself to modernization like the AR does, nor does it lend itself to modernization like the VZ58, which is why I have 2 videos on the channel about modernizing the VZ58 and not the AK. I started playing with modernizing the AK a little bit, and it just got heavier and kludgier and never better. I don't think the AK platform lends itself very well in its design for modernization, and I think it's, even if there was a lot more civilian market support, there might be better solutions, but I don't think the platform itself is well aligned for it. Philip K. Why aren't there any guns on the market with an ammo count like the pulse rifle from Aliens? Probably because it isn't all that useful. It looks cool, it sounds cool, in sci-fi land it's definitely cool, but in practice it's not all that important. I would like to see this happen, and I think it could be viable. And I don't know why we haven't seen anyone trying to. Probably because the cost to benefit ratio just isn't there. Once you get it working, if it's reliable, which would be challenging, recoil inducing, for example, isn't going to be reliable. So it just isn't that useful. Not useful enough to justify the development cost. Z. What's your opinion on Rare Breed Trigger's forced reset trigger? Mostly useless or completely useless? Neither would be my answer to that. I've said this so often on this channel over and over again. There's two ways to look at these devices, or devices like this. And Rare Breed's interesting in its rare approach. One is simply to make a thingamajig to let you fire your gun better to simulate full auto, because full auto is this mystical thing that, since we can't have it because of the NFA for most of us, we then turn it into this must-have thing. Truth is, once you get full auto, and I mean this, everyone I know, with the exception of some collectors, once you get one, you shoot it a bit, and then you're like, and then you don't shoot it much at all. I haven't shot my submachine gun in a couple of years. It costs a lot of money. It's neat, but the allure wears off fast. So that's why a lot of these devices exist, right? But here's what's interesting about Rare Breed Trigger. I don't know if it's useless or mostly useless in terms of how it actually physically functions. Truth is, the reality is I think you're much better off, if you want to shoot a high rate of fire with your gun accurately, you're better off with a high quality match trigger than you are one of these gimmicky things. But I do think Rare Breed designed their trigger specifically designed it, probably with legal input or with someone who was a lawyer, to use this device to stand off and get into a legal fight over the NFA. And in that regard, so these devices that are just designed to skirt NFA rules are one thing. I frequently don't, I'm not, whatever, cool, do what you want. But this one was designed specifically to cause what I think is going to be a legal challenge. And we know that's the case because just recently, was it a day ago, 2 days ago? ATF told them to cease and desist manufacture, and Rare Breed said no. So now this is where this gets interesting. Do I want one of these devices personally for the simulated full auto roll? I do not. But this is where we could actually have a legal move forward. When the manufacturer says no to that declaration because they legally believe they're in the right and are willing to put themselves at risk in this legal battle against the ATF, which by the way is a high-risk endeavor, but they're willing to do that, and they designed this thing specifically to make that legal battle very challenging for the ATF and the NFA laws, then we have a very interesting thing in regards to the Rare Breed Trigger. Physically or functionally, do I think the Rare Breed Trigger is a neat thing to have in my gun? No. However, does that make it useless? No, because in this instance, it's probably very useless, or very useful, excuse me, in that it was designed to trigger a legal event to challenge directly NFA law. So, in this regard, and the ATF, and their rulings that they just seem to make with fiat power and decide is now the new rule. So, I think Rare Breed Trigger is very useful from the perspective of being designed to cause this event to occur, which is happening right now, and this will be a very interesting thing to watch. William F. I'm always excited when you post new content, and sometimes I'll wait a few days to watch to when either I have time or can concentrate and enjoy without the kids in the throes of sibling combat. Am I hurting the channel by delaying views? No, not really. I mean, on YouTube, everything in the algorithm is based on, are you monetized? How many people engage with it? How many people click like? How many people click subscribe? How long do they watch the video before they quit watching the video? Very few people finish any video on YouTube entirely. They watch part of it and then quit. And that's called watch time. All of these things are engagement, and engagement then promotes it into the algorithm. The truth is, for the most part, InRange is so freaking blackballed and shadow banned by that piece of shit Google Alphabet Corporation and their corporate oligarchical control that I don't think it makes a difference, William. Now, it does help if you share the video. If you like the video, the best thing you can do for InRange is to share your video into forums with friends on YouTube, anywhere you can. If you like that particular video, share it, please, because that helps defeat the algorithm with organic support from people like you. So watch it when you see fit. Thank you for doing that. Click like please comment if you want, but most of all, if you can, share the video. The algorithm can't stop people from sharing the content. Sharing the content will help the views, and that's the best thing you can do. And if you do that, thank you so much. Timothy L. Given the addition of DMR stages to Desert Brutality 2021, can you give us a rundown of what you think makes a good DMR in your view? At this point, honestly, that's a really broad scope question, which probably could be a video on its own right. But if you were to ask me, I would think as minimal recoil as possible with the best ballistic coefficient, with a bipod, did I say minimum recoil? Minimal recoil, as little recoil as possible with best ballistic coefficient, good glass, and reasonable capacity. All of that lends itself to me to a 6.5 Creedmoor with a low power variable optical at LPVO, maybe with 10x at the max end, box magazine with probably 20 rounds on a bipod and a good trigger. In my opinion, when we're talking about the best DMR for the purposes of what I think that DMR would have, I would say that would be your best answer. 6.5 Creedmoor, semi-automatic, box-fed, LPVO, bipod. Good trigger. Matthew J. Does 7.65 Tokarev do better on spinners than 9mm? No. Spinners, the spinner target you've never seen on InRange is a plate on the top and a plate on the bottom. You have to hit them in order and eventually make the target go end over end. Truth is, this is one of the targets that actually mass matters more than anything. So in regards to spinners, the 7.65 Tokarev, even though it has higher velocity than 9mm in many instances, or at least in some instances, does not do better because it's a smaller bullet weight. The truth is, the bigger the bullet mass, the more the spinner moves. This is where 45 actually matters more, 10mm matters more. Bullet mass over bullet velocity. Of course, heavy bullets at higher velocities are even better, but bullet mass matters more than velocity. Eric S. Do you have any experience or interest in hydraulic buffer systems for AR-type rifles? Absolutely, giant exclamation point, no. There might be some out there in the market now that are better than what I've seen, but I have been around a lot of hydraulic buffers in the industry. When I was shooting high power for over a decade, and after that, we looked at hydraulic buffers when working on the What Would Stoner Do project. And the truth is, while they can function for a while and reduce felt recoil and work quite nicely, they do until they don't. They almost always eventually blow gaskets and leak. There might be exceptions. Maybe there's one on the market now that's better than others. I don't know. But every one of these that I've played with has been a massive failure point. And the truth is, that's why we went with the JP Capture Spring, which is a far better solution, mechanically oriented instead of hydraulically oriented. And I am not a fan of hydraulic buffers in ARs at all. M193 Goofball. Do you think pistol slides with integral red dots, components built into the slide itself, are on the horizon? Yes, I absolutely do. I would love to see something where it can just pop up, and I know NC Star has one, but no. I mean a quality one that literally is unobtrusive and goes doink when it comes out of the holster or something like that, or built into the slide directly, is absolutely going to happen sooner than later. And I think that that's a good move forward in regards to red dots in general. Lord Bacon. Last question, Lord Bacon. In today's age of miniaturized pistol red dots, do lasers on pistols still serve any purpose? No. I don't think lasers on pistols ever served much of a purpose, to be completely honest with you. They were a gee-whiz thing that looked cool, scary. They might have an intimidation factor against the opponent. Maybe. Do not depend on intimidation factor for anything in self-defense. But lasers really are not very effective, very hard to use in anything that's not low light or dark. Even in the Arizona environment, the best lasers are invisible during the day. And the reality is that they could be used in unorthodox angles, and firing solutions still applies to red dots as long as you can get your head behind the gun. I mean, you can't stick your hand under a thing with a laser and try to use it with a red dot like you could with a laser. But that's the most unlikely scenario that it doesn't matter. So I don't think lasers ever had much application, and with red dots on pistols, they have even less, if any at all. Anyways, we're up at the hour, as we always tend to be with these Q&As. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. This is also produced as a podcast for all Patreon supporters. And once again, I must remind you that InRange is completely viewer-supported. No sponsors, no overlords, no advertisers, no money from YouTube Red, only you the viewer. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. If you're already one of them, thank you so much. Thank you for those of you that submitted the questions. If you're not, please consider it. If you can't be, I do understand. As I already mentioned earlier in the video, the best thing you can do is help the channel by liking the content, subscribing to the channel, click that dumb bell, I don't know, just try it. But more importantly than anything, comment and share the video with your friends on any platform you can to be my organic algorithm to defeat the corporate overlords and their shadow banning. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel in whatever way you can, and more content coming soon.